I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Harold Eytan, CEO of Particle. Harold, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me, Ashton. Pleasure to be here.
You're very welcome. Let's dive straight into it. You and your team are working on some great innovations at Particle, and I feel like now in the cryptocurrency markets, with a little bit of a bearish trend, is like the best time to be heads down, just working hard on these innovations. And there's so many good companies that are just building amazing products right now. So let's just break right into it with starting the conversation on a little bit about the solutions that you and your team at Particle are working on, and then we'll dive into all things in the space.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so what we're kind of what we're addressing at Particle is mainly the issue of access and opacity of the fine art market and the fine art experience generally. How I've defined myself, the fine art experience is really a four-piece puzzle of the art itself, of course, knowledge and education around the art. And a lot of people in the fine art world, they have masters in history of art, etc. But you can do your own research as well. But really having that expert knowledge is difficult to attain. Then there's access to the art, access to the advisors, access to the let's say the ins and out of the art market and how things work. For people who are trying to get into fine art collecting, where do you start? Very difficult. And the final piece of the puzzle is really ownership. And that's kind of the final piece that that I believe is kind of the major value add of Particle. It's that there's this kind of concept that ownership enhances the enjoyment of art. And it's almost like a chemical reaction in your brain where if we're in a room together and we're looking at the same kind of work of art, let's call it an Andy Warhol, we may both appreciate it and appreciate its beauty, etc., and in its historical context, etc. However, if you own that work of art, you appreciate that much more, and this little extra piece really makes a world of a difference, and is what the majority of people actually don't get to experience, that whole holistic fine art experience of these four kind of puzzles. And so in parallel to that, fine art the whole experience has only been available to kind of a select few high net worth people, and these masterpieces, which were really created by humanity's genius for the enjoyment of the masses, a lot of them are held in free ports, warehouses around the world, because they've been bought and transacted for purely financial reasons. So what we're trying to do here is to open up this fine art world to a greater audience and offer them all pieces to the puzzle. Now, I say all of this, but what does it actually kind of end up looking as a product is really Particle. What we do is we offer to our community ownership in fine art masterpieces, and we do that by putting a masterpiece, like we did with Banksy's Love is in the Air, that we tokenized, if you want, in early this year, end of January, and we put it through the particleization process. Essentially what it is it digitally fractionalizes it into 10,000 unique NFTs that represent specific plots of land on the painting. These are then sold as NFTs and can be openly traded on the secondary market, and that allows for everybody to have really a piece or multiple pieces of this painting and feel that ownership piece of the puzzle. In parallel to that, we of course offer education and access to advisors and everything that's around the whole experience around that painting and around the art world generally. So what we're really doing is kind of establishing a new art curator or collector class, and these particles, what we call them, these NFTs, essentially, because they represent ownership in the art, they also allow you to govern the art itself. What do we do with it? Where should we exhibit it? Should it be sold if there's an offer on it or not? Should we loan it to a certain museum, a certain gallery? All of these decisions are put up to the collector community.
Very cool. Yeah. Great intro, Harold. And yeah, you're right. I don't know a lot about the traditional fine art industry, but from what I understand, it's like this walled garden that like you're either inside the club or you're totally out of it. And when you're moving to a new version of that and with adding digital, it's hard to break apart the club that already exists unless there's benefits for them as well. And democratizing access to these pieces of fine art, I feel like, is a great way for potentially for them to capitalize on the industry as well. Have you heard any feedback from like traditional industry on this transition into moving fine art into Web3, and if they like it, or is it similar to how the banks are afraid of crypto because it's sort of taking over their industry?
I think the general attitude is one of caution, I would say. You, of course, have certain parties that are more open to being innovative and see the benefits in that, see that you can leverage a community to purchase these works of art. They would see this as another sales channel for them. But for sure, while this Banksy that was sold to our community, it's called the Lovers in the Air, and you must know it's the protagonist that kind of throws a bouquet of flowers rather than a Molotov cocktail, and that kind of is kind of how we're approaching what we're doing. We're not trying to destroy the status quo. We're just trying to offer a kind of beautiful alternative to how things are happening right now. And it's just there's certain galleries, certain museums that do subscribe to that and see where we're going. But for sure, a lot feel threatened, and also, in the very basics of this close-knit, opaque fine art community is about exclusivity and keeping the circle as small as possible. And so when you're doing something that's trying to kind of break that, then you do get pushback. But I think what we're proving here is that you have just a massive and we're only scratching the surface, barely scratching the surface of that the addressable audience for this kind of service. But what you do see is that there's tons and tons of people that want to get involved, can't because for financial reasons they don't have millions of dollars to spend, but they would be the champions of the art. And if you this is all what Web3 is about, right? Is to leverage the community to kind of achieve more than what a small group of people would be able to do beforehand. And I think that's what these Web3 tools allow us to do. And DAOs is really what it is a way to organize humans to be able to work together more effectively and achieve greater things than what was previously possible with the limited tools we had for humans to kind of work together asynchronously.
Great insight, Harold. And now, with that said about approaching with caution from the old world, how does your team approach that problem at hand? It must be a challenge to sort of build technology and either approach the artists or approach the museums and actually start this integration into Web3 art.
So the question is, how do we approach these these kind of traditional players?
Yeah.
We do it by trying to speak their language and trying to show. So there are certain kind of certain steps. I wouldn't say steps, but there's a framework within which they operate, and we try to frame our pitch, if you want, within that kind of way of thinking that they have. They have commission structures, they have certain clauses in their agreements when they sell to individual collectors, and we try and see. It's always we don't have a like a single rigid solution for all of these parties. What we do is we negotiate and we figure out what is the best fit. You have to speak to a gallerist different to you speak to an artist, differently to when you speak to a collector. So kind of we're in the process of fine-tuning that pitch and figuring out for each of these parties what is the best way to approach them and what actually makes them tick. That's kind of how we're approaching it. But it's not easy, and it's definitely a work in progress and something that we're learning as these conversations are happening, right?
I feel like the digitization and fractionalization of these fine art pieces is inevitable. At what speed the industry moves into, fully encompassing that, I'm not sure. But how quickly do you sort of see it happening? We're seeing great artists like Banksy starting to fractionalize, but there's not even a decimal of a percent of fine art that's actually been tokenized and fractionalized. Do you see it becoming the norm in 10 years, or how long-term vision are you and your team looking?
Look, I don't think it's going to be I think that ultimately people are always going to want to have. There's always going to be individuals who are going to want to have major masterpieces hanging in their living rooms, right? So I don't think I don't think it's ever going to move completely to a fully decentralized ownership of all of the world's kind of fine art. But definitely there are going to be, as businesses like ours start to facilitate the kind of communal ownership of these assets, I think it's going to become more and more popular. But the key here is to make sure that this doesn't only become a digital experience, and that it's very easy for the art to then just remain in a warehouse and just say, well, look, you own a piece of it, enjoy that piece, and it's done. That's why we're putting such an emphasis on the kind of real world events. And I think that's what I've also found with the whole NFT ecosystem, is while it's all online and everybody, everyone is remote, etc., you have all of these NFT conferences around the world that are just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger each time. People want to meet in real life, and that's why we host exhibits IRL in museums, like we did at the ICA in Miami in December, and we did in galleries in New York and in LA previously, and now we have a vote for a European city for the tour. So the kind of the owners of this Banksy get to vote on that. But I think it's having the putting the emphasis on the physical, and not losing sight that this is a physical work of art that needs to be experienced really in its to experience it in its entirety. You have to be in the presence of the art. It does have definitely it makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the physical is kind of a very important part of it.
I completely agree, and I feel like people that get deep into NFTs and cryptocurrencies, and when they see something that's physical, even like the physical Bitcoins, they get like this nostalgic feeling, like, oh, something in real life that I can actually see. And with fine art, that's especially true. Now, I want to sort of flip the switch to the other side to talk about the people that now are able to invest and own a piece of these pieces of art through your technology. How does that work for somebody who was interested in fine art, but they weren't able to access it because of financial reasons, as you mentioned, and now they can go to your site and then they can see works of art that are just actively available, or there's a drop, and things like Banksy, they're announced and then they sell out right away. How does that work for somebody that wants to buy a piece of art?
Yeah, so we've only done this so far once with the Banksy. That was kind of the test in the market, which was which successful. And so how it works is a drop. So we go out and we source with our team of kind of art experts, which includes Loïc Gouzer, who's one of the founders of Particle, and was the former co-chairman of contemporary and post-war and contemporary art at Christie's. So we source kind of these masterpieces, pick one that we believe is the right one to offer to the community, and structure it like a drop. So it's particleized into, in the case of the Banksy, 10,000 different pieces, and sold as such, basically. So the next one that we're looking to do is going to happen probably around October, because we're currently kind of revamping and rebuilding our platform to enhance that experience, both on the drop minting purchasing side, but also on the marketplace side and on the whole experience of the digital ownership side. But it'll happen. It'll happen in around October and November with the second painting. Now the goal is to do that. Now I think it'll give us some time as well to rebuild from this kind of lull in the market, right? Mm-hmm. but the goal is to be able to build a platform where we can have a very healthy cadence of art being offered to our community.
Great to hear, and I'm looking forward to that drop. I will follow along for that.
Yeah, it's on you go on particlecollection.com is our website, and yeah, like I was saying, really the goal from now until then, until October, November, is really to build the experience that is going to allow us to onboard a lot of the non-crypto native people. I think that's what a lot of people have realized, is that while there's a lot of money in crypto and in NFTs more specifically, there's not actually that many active participants. There's a lot of kind of hurdles to actually end up buying a digital asset, and so we need to make sure that we make this as user-friendly and as accessible to people who are not crypto native, which is our kind of potentially could be that. Well, I think is actually would for sure be the bigger part of our audience, which right now heavily skews towards crypto native, and that brings me to the fact that we have a more crypto native audience right now, and group of owners. It comes with different expectations for how NFT projects, and we're categorized as an NFT project, but I don't think we are. We're leveraging non-fungible technology, but we're not really an NFT digital art project. But the expectations are different than when you're than what you should be expecting when you're dealing with fine art masterpieces. I think being able to cater and building something that caters better to such an audience, a non-crypto native audience, is what makes sense for our project specifically.
Yeah, well said, Harold, and I completely agree. I feel like we're so early on with this that it's really the tech nerds that have jumped on it first, and eventually, when more fine art is on Web3 and tokenized, it will be more of that original audience, sort of, hey, checking this out with technology incorporated. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out, and just how the NFT market. You sort of mentioned there about in October, hopefully the market's sort of shifting upwards. Do you expect to see a revival and a growth of the NFT industry bigger than what it has been? At the beginning of this year was sort of the biggest it's ever been. What's your trajectory for NFTs in fine art and things that aren't really tech related in the coming 2 years or 3 years?
Yeah, look, I think that the massive boom in NFTs, the past year has really been. It was triggered, I think, by Beeple and his massive sale, but really it was carried and really propulsed by the PFP projects, and then you have so many of those that NFT is synonymous with a PFP project right now, and to the detriment of one-of-one digital artists and the packs, the Beeples. Yes, they're doing absolutely fine, but the eyeballs are all on these PFP projects that offer more and more utility, more and more financial utility. I think if you bought an ape at Mint, you got something like 86 ETH of additional value from the airdrops that they gave you. Wow. But not everyone is able to sustain that kind of model. Very few are, and I think a lot of projects now have crashed. A lot probably are gone forever, and so I think that the next wave is really going to be, hopefully, we're going to move away from this NFT equals PFP. NFT is a technology that can be used for just basically pretty much anything, really, and my hopes is that we're going to see something that's a little more stable, and it's going to be to the benefit of projects such as ours.
Great insight, Harold. And for the viewers that want to check out the community and so follow along to get notice of the next drop and just the updates for Particle, what's the best way to stay involved?
Yeah, on particlecollection.com is where is our site. On Twitter, collect Particle, and then we have our DAO Twitter, which is Particle DAO XYZ on Twitter as well. And just to touch on that, how how we facilitate the governance of all these paintings is essentially that each painting is its own kind of sub DAO. So you can, if you go to the Particle DAO XYZ Twitter, you'll be able to get access to our discourse, and you'll see kind of the conversations that are happening around Banksy's Love is in the Air, and kind of the governance processes that are being put in place by the community, and how it's developing, and it's only very fresh, right? And a lot of things need to be fleshed out. But it's the beginning of something that I think is really exciting and really revolutionary, honestly.
Very cool. I will leave those links in the description box below to make it easy for the viewers as well. Thank you for the insights, Harold. All the best on everything Particle moving forward, and let's follow up in the near future.
Sounds good. Thank you.